Good morning. I'm Carl Thayer, Professor Emeritus at the University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy in Canberra. I'd like to thank the Centre for New American Security and particularly Dr. Pat Cronin for inviting me to address you through the means of video. And that wouldn't be possible without the assistance of the Creative Media Unit here at the University of New South Wales, so I'd like to thank them as well. I've divided my talk today into three parts. One will focus firstly on ASEAN and how it addresses maritime security issues. The second part will address how ASEAN works with its external dialogue partners to address regional security. And I'd like to end by looking at the agenda for maritime security this year and into the near-term future. So now let me turn to part one. And I want to begin with four sweeping generalizations. Maritime security had no particular focus in ASEAN until 2010, and now it has been institutionalized in several multilateral institutions. Discussion on maritime security has moved from very general to specific practical activities. Maritime security was once seen only as state security. It's now viewed as a regional ASEAN security concern. And maritime security is definitely on the ASEAN agenda at the highest level. It's set within the framework of building an ASEAN community by 2015 and creating, among that, an ASEAN political security community, and that's where maritime security nests. There is a blueprint for this political security community which gives guidance, and part of that guidance is it separates the South China Sea issues from broader maritime security, and it's to implement a 2002 Declaration on Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea agreed with China, and at the same time address maritime security by establishing, which it did, an ASEAN Maritime Forum. Now, as a result of the coming into effect of the Charter in 2008, ASEAN structure will change in terms of its nomenclature. The highest level, the ASEAN Summit, it heads of government. It is preceded by a consultative council of foreign ministers, which is now known as the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting. And beneath them are three community councils: political security, economic, and socio-cultural, and it's the political security community that's as important to us. If we look at the more recent meetings now of the ASEAN foreign ministers and the ASEAN Summit, how do they address regional security? Well, the annual ministerial meeting in Brunei last year separated, as I said, maritime security and made broad commitments and statements that it was important to regional well-being. It also addressed the South China Sea by urging the implementation of cooperative programs set out under the Declaration of Conduct of Parties. And the ministers were tasked later by the summit to work actively with China to move quickly to conclude an agreement on the Code of Conduct. Now, the ASEAN Summit merely endorses activities and suggestions by the foreign ministers, and it rarely sets new policy. But it insisted that ASEAN should leverage its institutions in dealing with external powers, giving guidance to make ASEAN central to regional maritime security concerns. It once again reiterated its support for the DOC and consultations with China, and endorsed the idea of a hotline. Now, if we look more specifically at the ASEAN political security community, we can see it consists of a meeting of ASEAN defense ministers, ADMM, other security agencies, and the ASEAN Maritime Forum. Now, if I turn to the ASEAN defense ministers meeting, its structure consists of informal meetings of chiefs of defense, and annually the senior defense officials meet to prepare the agenda for the defense ministers based on inputs from the chiefs of Army, which holds separate meetings, chiefs of Navy, of concern to us, chiefs of Air, and chiefs of Intelligence. The ADMM has adopted 3-year work plans, adopt concept papers on a whole variety of topics relevant to maritime security, and has begun to conduct tabletop exercises, the first practical steps. If we look at the 7th ADMM meeting, they adopted concept papers on defense interaction, logistics, humanitarian mine action, and the arrangement of the co-chairs. The workhorse is the ASEAN Chiefs of Navy meeting. They were set up originally in 2001, but they now meet annually since 2011. Their remit is to enhance cooperation and interoperability and regional maritime security and stability through various initiatives. And these have taken place in great detail, the 5th, 6th, and 7th meetings of the chiefs. Let me just focus on the more recent one, the 7th meeting that was held in the Philippines. It endorsed the series of bilateral and multilateral joint and coordinated patrols and activities that had been carried out previously. It has agreed to implement an ASEAN greeting protocol at sea when warships pass and meet each other, and directed the establishment of hotlines. There are young naval officer exchanges in the works and practical exercises. So that was the ASEAN defense ministers. Let me turn to another body, the ASEAN Maritime Forum. Its remit is a very broad one related to the 3 pillars of the ASEAN community: the political security, economic, and social culture. It's in the process of institutionalizing itself and has asked for advice from the ASEAN Secretariat as to how to accomplish it. Its most recent meeting, the 4th AMF, discussed in broad terms how to build trust and confidence and cooperate at sea. I'd like to turn to part 2 and look at ASEAN-centered dialogue and cooperation. And we have 2 parallel paths: those conducted through the ASEAN Regional Forum, which is ASEAN plus members across East and South Asia, and the so-called ASEAN Plus, where ASEAN has reached out to its dialogue partners. The long-standing one with which you'll be familiar is the ARF, or the ASEAN Regional Forum. It has a program on maritime security with 3 priority areas: intelligence and information exchanges, confidence building measures on maritime security, and capacity building by maritime law enforcement agencies. At the most recent meeting of the ASEAN Regional Forum, an important decision was made, and that was to invite to its intersessional meeting on maritime security representatives from the ASEAN Defense Ministers Plus Expert Working Group on Maritime Security, and I'll be discussing that in a moment. So now let me turn to the ASEAN Defense Ministers Plus. That includes 8 dialogue partners: the United States, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, Russia, and China. This is the premier venue for strategic dialogue in defense and security among ASEAN and its major external partners, and it focuses on practical cooperation. It does that through initially 5 and now 6 expert working groups. The most important to us is maritime security, but there is overlap with humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, a focus on peacekeeping, counterterrorism, military medicine, and mine clearance. That's the new body. The second ADMM Plus meeting took place in Brunei, and it meets now every 2 years, and discuss and approve the setting up of an expert working group on humanitarian mine action. And it discussed how the defense sector could collaborate with the security officials in cybersecurity, bioterrorism, transnational trafficking, and pandemic diseases. But the workhorse of the ADMM is the Expert Working Group on Maritime Security, currently co-chaired by Australia and Malaysia, and they'll relinquish that spot this year. They conducted 4 key activities: humanitarian assistance in military medicine, counterterrorism, a field training exercise on maritime security, and peacekeeping. These involve ASEAN navies interacting not only with themselves, but with their more advanced partners. Finally, let me turn to the other Plus organization, the Expanded Maritime Forum, and I'll deal with that in brief. It's still a work in progress because its remit is to address those 3 broad pillars. They are still looking to develop the priorities that it and its dialogue partners should develop. They want to focus on freedom of navigation, military law enforcement. So as I say, it's a work in progress. So that leads me to my third part. How do these institutions all relate to the most important leaders-led forum of heads of government and state, the East Asia Summit? That composes the ASEAN 10 memberships: China, Japan, Korea, India, Australia, New Zealand, plus the United States and Russia. The East Asian Summit has 6 priority areas, and not one of them is directly related to maritime security. And maritime security is raised by leaders when they attend either at the summit or during the informal retreat. At the 8th East Asia Summit, the most recent one, we just got very general statements about wanting to maintain peace and security, the non-use of force, and upholding of international law. This broad statement was made because of territorial disputes in the South China Sea, and the lack of specifics was, of course, due because China was present and would object to anything that was binding on it. So the East Asia Summit it will continue to meet. It's important. And it raises the question whether the regional architecture shouldn't be streamlined. And in the diagram that I've shown you here, one suggestion is to group all the present multilateral bodies under the East Asia Summit. Now, I haven't dealt with the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, APEC, which is economic, but I have dealt with the ARF, the ASEAN Defense Ministers Plus, and the enlarged ASEAN Maritime Forum. And the idea is that when these ministerial bodies meet, they could cough up proposals to the East Asia Summit itself. If we're looking beyond the present into the future, the most important is this little red arrow at the bottom, where we have a linkage between the ASEAN Regional Forum's intersessional meeting on maritime security and its invitation for the expert working group members under the Defense Ministers Plus to join them in their talks. So we now have a synergy and a breaking down of some of these walls. ASEAN, its focus will be on intensifying building the political security community with a deadline of the end of 2015. Its immediate priority is on consultations with China related to the South China Sea, implementing the guidelines of the Declaration on Conduct of Party, and there are a number of working groups looking at specific areas, and then moving the consultations on a formal code of conduct along and pressing the idea of an early harvest. Once an agreement on a particular activity is to be reached, it should be implemented immediately, not put in a basket waiting for the entire code to be agreed upon. The ASEAN Regional Forum, it's drawing up a work plan for 2014-16, and its thrust will be to move from confidence building to specific preventative diplomacy measures. And finally, the most important development is that the ASEAN Maritime Forum and the enlarged ASEAN Maritime Forum will now meet back to back. ASEAN will caucus first and then meet with its dialogue partners and work out their agenda for the future. And the most important development then within this framework is that Indonesia will host the first ASEAN and its dialogue partners joint naval training exercises in March, April this year. 17 participants, 28 warships, 4,500 will take part, a very landmark event. So in conclusion, let me say that although ASEAN maritime security policy is fragmented among several institutions, we are seeing progress in implementing practical activities, and we are finally seeing some of the walls breaking down between these bodies and a little bit more coordination. And so with push from the top by the leaders, we can expect maritime cooperation, I think, to enter into a new era this year and beyond. Thank you.